Imagine a queen who rose from the shadows of servitude to command a throne, a woman so feared and despised that her name became synonymous with betrayal, scandal, and blood. This is a tale of Fredegund of Neustria, the low-born girl who seduced a king, manipulated a court, and left behind one of the darkest reputations of the early Middle Ages. Hers is not the story of a gentle queen draped in silks and jewels, but a ruthless survivor who wielded lust, lies, and violence as her weapons. In the chronicles of history, few women have been remembered with such infamy, and yet her journey began humbly, with nothing to her name but her cunning and her will to rise. Fredegund's early life was marked by obscurity. Born into a poor, low-born family, she entered the royal household not as a noble, but as a servant girl. She scrubbed floors, dressed queens, and fetched water, all the while watching, learning, and waiting. Unlike most girls in her position, she understood that beauty and intelligence could carve a path through walls of power, even in a world ruled by kings and warriors. In time, her sharp wit and undeniable allure drew the eye of King Chilperic I of Neustria, a man known for his own vices, passions, and ambition. From that moment, Fredegund's life would never again belong to the shadows. At first, she served Queen Aldavra, Chilperic's wife, a woman of noble birth and traditional piety. But Fredegund saw the cracks in their marriage, the dissatisfaction in the king's eyes, and she slipped into those cracks like poison seeping into a wound. Soon she became the king's mistress, and her hold on him deepened with every encounter. She was not merely a lover but a strategist, convincing him that she alone understood his ambitions, that together they could achieve greatness. Her influence grew so strong that Aldavra's position became unbearable. Eventually, Aldavra was cast aside, stripped of her place, and condemned to exile and misery. For some, this might have been enough, rising from servant to royal mistress. But for Fredegund, it was only the beginning. When Aldavra was gone, Fredegund claimed her prize, becoming queen in her place. The crown did not rest lightly, for with it came enemies at court, nobles who despised her low birth, priests who condemned her as sinful, and a populace that whispered of her treachery. But Fredegund thrived in hostility. She did not seek to win love. She sought to command fear. Those who opposed her too openly soon found themselves silenced, and those who sought to flatter her discovered her talent for rewarding loyalty. Her marriage to Chilperic was hardly one of faithfulness. The king was known for his wandering desires, but Fredegund was his equal in this. Whispers circulated that she took lovers among the nobles, and perhaps even more scandalously, among the royal family itself. Chroniclers tell us that she seduced her own stepsons, the king's sons from his first marriage. Whether these tales were truth or malicious rumor is uncertain, but the scandal alone was enough to stain her name. For her enemies, such whispers were proof of her corruption, and for her supporters, they were evidence of her power. After all, what greater sign of dominance and control even the heirs of the throne? But lust was not her only weapon. Fredegund understood that the throne of Neustria could not remain secure while Chilperic's older sons lived. They were heirs by right, and their existence threatened the future of her own children. One by one, these boys began to die. Illnesses that appeared sudden, accidents that seemed too convenient, and assassinations whispered of Fredegund's hand behind them. Poison slipped into cups, daggers wielded in the night. Her court became a place where death lurked behind every curtain. Whether she directly ordered each death or whether fear exaggerated the truth, the effect was the same. Her children's rivals vanished, and her grip on succession tightened. The air of menace surrounding her only deepened when she crossed paths with her most formidable enemy, Queen Brunhilde of Austrasia. If Fredegund represented treachery and seduction, Brunhilde stood for reform and authority. Where Fredegund had clawed her way from servitude to the throne, Brunhilde was born into nobility, a Visigothic princess who married into Frankish royalty. Their rivalry was not only political but deeply personal, fueled by mutual hatred and mutual recognition of the other's cunning. The kingdoms of Neustria and Austrasia clashed repeatedly, their wars often sparked by the feuds of these two queens. Chroniclers would later describe their conflict as one of the most bitter rivalries in medieval history, a decades-long struggle in which thousands perished, all because two women refused to yield. Even within her own court, Fredegund remained a figure of dread. Nobles learned to flatter her with trembling voices. Priests denounced her but feared her retaliation, and women envied and despised her in equal measure. Stories of her beauty traveled far, but so did stories of her cruelty. She was said to smile sweetly at a feast, while secretly arranging the death of the guests seated across from her. Her chambers were thought to hold not just silks and jewels, but poisons, daggers, and plans for treachery. To live near her was to live on the edge of terror. Yet despite the fear she inspired, Fredegund proved herself more than a mistress of lust and murder. She was also a political strategist of rare skill. She knew when to bribe, when to threaten, when to seduce, and when to kill. Her mastery of these arts made her indispensable to Chilperic, and he relied on her counsel even as he indulged his own desires. Together, they ruled Neustria with a mixture of brutality and cunning, outmaneuvering rivals and crushing dissent. Still, the greatest stain on her name was not merely the murders, nor the whispers of witchcraft that would later cling to her, but the scandal of her supposed affairs with her stepsons. Medieval society recoiled at the thought, and even if the stories were exaggerated, they struck at the very core of her reputation. A queen who betrayed her king, who seduced his heirs, and who destroyed rivals with cold calculation was a queen unlike any other. For some, she was the embodiment of sin. For others, the embodiment of survival. By the end of her rise, Fredegund had transformed from a forgotten servant girl into one of the most feared women in Europe. She had destroyed a queen, seduced a king, and left a trail of bodies in her wake. Her enemies trembled, her allies schemed, and her stepsons, those who survived, learned to tread carefully in her presence. She had secured her crown, her children's future, and her position as one of history's most scandalous queens. But if her story so far seems filled with scandal and betrayal, it was only the beginning. For Fredegund's life would not end with mere whispers of affairs and secret murders. Her path would grow darker, her enemies fiercer, and her legacy bloodier. She was about to step into the most dangerous chapter of her life, one that would ensure her name was never forgotten. Because what came next was not just scandal, it was murder on a royal scale. It was the fall of kings, the rise of children, and the clash of queens. It was the transformation of a scandalous queen into a queen regent, feared not only in her lifetime, but for centuries after. And when King Chilperic's blood was spilled in the woods, all eyes turned to Fredegund, the widow who was suddenly more powerful than ever. The woods were silent when the scream rang out. King Chilperic, Fredegund's husband, was found stabbed to death while hunting, his lifeless body left sprawled among the trees. To the people of Neustria, it was shocking, but to those who knew Fredegund, suspicion immediately fell upon her. Who else stood to gain more from his death than the queen herself? With Chilperic gone, her infant son Clotaire was the sole heir to the throne, and Fredegund was named regent. Overnight, she shifted from being a queen consort overshadowed by her husband to the woman who controlled a kingdom. Her enemies thought she would be vulnerable, a widow with only a child to protect, but they underestimated her. Fredegund was never more dangerous than when she stood alone. The court trembled as she took the reins of power. Nobles who thought to manipulate her discovered instead that she would manipulate them. She mastered the art of balancing fear and reward, crushing her enemies with merciless efficiency while rewarding loyalists with favors that bound them to her cause. Whenever whispers of rebellion arose, she responded swiftly, not hesitating to use assassins or soldiers to strike first. She knew that hesitation in her position meant death, so she made it clear that she was no weak regent. Fredegund was ruling for her son, but in truth, she ruled for herself. Her greatest threat remained Queen Brunhilde of Austrasia. With Chilperic gone, Brunhilde saw her chance to dominate the Frankish kingdoms and weaken Neustria. The two women clashed not only with armies, but with endless schemes of intrigue. Brunhilde tried to place her descendants on the throne of Francia, while Fredegund fought to secure her son's inheritance. Every move Brunhilde made was countered with a ruthless strike from Fredegund, and every attempt to destabilize Neustria was met with bloodshed. Their rivalry reached beyond personal hatred. It was a battle for dynasties, a feud that defined an era. In her regency, Fredegund unleashed her full talent for deception and cruelty. She orchestrated the assassination of bishops who defied her authority, sparing none of the clergy who dared condemn her sins. Stories circulated that she ordered poisonings at banquets, had daggers slipped beneath cloaks, and even used women in her household as spies and assassins. She had a keen eye for loyalty and betrayal, and once she marked someone as a threat, their days were numbered. Under her rule, the palace became a place of paranoia, where smiles were masks and every gesture carried hidden meaning. But as much as fear was her ally, so too was superstition. In a world where people believed strongly in charms, omens, and curses, Fredegund gained a reputation for consorting with sorcerers and dabbling in witchcraft. People whispered that her power came not only from her mind, but from dark arts. They said she cast spells to weaken her enemies, brewed potions to ensnare lovers, and used charms to protect her throne. Whether these stories were true or not mattered little. What mattered was that they gave her an aura of dread, as if she were something more than human. For her enemies, this reputation made her untouchable, for who would dare challenge a queen rumored to have the devil himself at her side? Despite the constant wars and bloodshed, Fredegund proved to be a capable ruler. She managed to keep Neustria intact during a time of chaos, defending her son's rights with ferocity. Every assassination, every manipulation, was part of her greater plan to ensure Clotair's survival and eventual dominance. And though her enemies despised her, they could not deny that she had a strategic brilliance that rivaled any king's. She used marriage alliances, bribes, and betrayals as effectively as she used armies, ensuring that Neustria did not collapse under pressure. Yet her personal life remained as scandalous as ever. Even as a widow, rumors of lovers clung to her name. Chroniclers accused her of taking noblemen into her bed, using seduction as another weapon in her arsenal. The most shocking tales continued to insist that she had lain with her stepsons, and though those men were gone, the stain of that rumor never faded. In a society obsessed with bloodlines and purity, this was the ultimate mark of corruption. For Fredegund, though, reputation mattered less than survival, and she cared little for the whispers so long as she kept her grip on power. Her reign was not without tragedy. Some of her children died young, and many whispered that even their deaths were the result of her plotting, sacrificing the weak to strengthen the strong. Others claimed she wept like any mother, though her enemies painted her as heartless. In truth, she was both, a mother who loved fiercely the son she believed destined to rule all Francia, and a queen who would destroy anything and anyone that stood in his path. As years passed, her feud with Brunhilde only deepened. Battles raged between Neustria and Austrasia, spilling rivers of blood. Though Brunhilde sought to break her, Fredegund outlived many of her rivals, holding her ground with iron will. Even in illness and age, she never softened. She died in 597, leaving behind her son Clotaire II, who eventually became the sole king of the Franks, uniting the kingdoms under his rule. His survival and triumph were her greatest victory, the final proof that her ruthless methods had not been in vain. But death did not erase her reputation. To later generations, Fredegund became a legend of wickedness, the queen who rose from nothing, seduced a king, destroyed his sons, and ruled with terror. She was remembered as a murderess, a temptress, a witch, and a political mastermind. Historians debated whether she was truly as evil as her enemies claimed, or whether chroniclers, loyal to Brunhilde's side, exaggerated her sins to paint her as a monster. Still, even the most skeptical could not deny that she left a legacy drenched in scandal and fear. What makes Fredegund so unforgettable is not only her crimes, but the sheer audacity of her rise. In a time when women were expected to be obedient, she shattered every expectation, proving that ambition and cunning could be more powerful than birthright or armies. She played the game of power as ruthlessly as any man, and she won. That she did so by allegedly seducing her stepsons, murdering rivals, and terrifying a kingdom only added to the legend. Her story continues to fascinate because it reads like a medieval tragedy filled with betrayal, forbidden passion, and endless blood. It forces us to ask whether she was a villain or a survivor, whether her sins were truly hers or the inventions of her enemies. Perhaps she was all of these things, a woman who could be cruel and tender, loving and murderous, a queen who embodied both the beauty and the darkness of power. Fredegund and Neustria did not fade quietly into history. She exploded into it, carving her name with poison and steel, leaving behind a tale that has survived more than 1,000 years, whether you see her as a monster or a mastermind. Her story proves that in the brutal world of the early Middle Ages, The most dangerous force was not always a sword. It was a woman who knew how to use it. And so her legend endures. The queen who began as a servant and rose higher than anyone imagined. The queen accused of lying with her stepsons, of murdering her husband, of weaving plots in shadows. She remains a figure of scandal, a reminder that power can be won by anyone bold enough to take it, and that history never forgets those who rule with both beauty and blood.